Good evening. Welcome to the November 30th special joint meeting with the Select Board and the Planning Board. This meeting will be broadcast live and recorded by Foxboro Cable Access. Do you guys have to move into session, or?
We probably do.
Sure.
Okay.
Welcome to the Foxborough Planning Board / Select Board meeting this evening, and as Doc said, this meeting will be recorded and also be broadcast on Zoom.
Foxboro Cable Access.
Foxborough Cable Access. I'm sorry,
And Zoom. Gary on Zoom too. Thank you for saying that.
and one of our members, Gary, is also coming in on Zoom.
Yeah, he's not there yet, but hopefully he will be joining us.
All right, so this is sort of like an open discussion between the boards to start the process and the discussion rolling about the MBTA communities. And from here you go, Paige.
Thank you. I just want to note that I saw that Dennis just joined us, so.
Okay. Dennis is joining in on
Dennis,
Zoom.
the other select board member, is on Zoom.
Okay.
You can't see him right now because we're going to go through a PowerPoint. Dennis, can you hear us okay? Give a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, great.
Great. So thank you all for coming, and for those here, my name is Paige Duncan. I'm the acting town manager, but in my day job, I'm the director of land use and economic development, and I have with me Gabby Jordan, and she's our staff planner here in Foxborough, and Barney Overett. He is the chairman of our Board of Appeals and sort of our zoning guru. So we've been working with a consultant, Goldson Associates, to start the planning for the MBTA communities, which we'll get into what that is. We've been working with them. We did get a grant from the state, or actually I believe it was Mass Housing Partnership, this grant, and they've been assisting us to sort of begin looking at what we need to do, what we may do, and we're going to dig into this now. We felt like it was an important time to come to these two boards to start the open dialogue as to what direction we're going to head. We have some suggestions, but obviously no decisions have been made. We don't think any of us at this table should be making these decisions. It's more led by these two boards and then obviously the residents of Foxborough. So if I may, I'm just going to start our presentation. Okay, or not.
Yeah.
Here we go again. Let's see if this works. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna stop all this, stop share, start over again.
Got a nice view of Dennis.
Yeah, there's Dennis, in case you didn't know he was there.
Hey,
I tell you, the Zoom is gonna be the death of me with this power sharing screen. Thank you. All right, let's see if this works. It always comes up, it just doesn't move. Okay, so let's see. Oh, no.
No, you were.
Well, there we go.
Here we go. Good.
Okay, so tonight we're going to give you a brief background. A lot of people know, but those at home might not, so we'll do that. We're going to go over a district map proposal, discuss the location of possible proposed districts. We have a draft bylaw that we've initially started, and then we'll start talking about next steps. So what we're talking about tonight is the MBTA Communities Law. It was enacted in 2021 by the state legislature. Any community that's considered an MBTA community is required to pass legislation, which we'll describe more next slide. But basically there's 175 communities affected by this law in Massachusetts. The law here talks about, it came kind of out of nowhere. It was in an economic development bond bill that was passed by the legislature, and it included this provision that said that any MBTA community shall have a zoning bylaw that provides for at least one district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. Requires a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, and at that time it was just this law, and since then guidelines have been promulgated. So the major statutory requirements are that, as I already mentioned, multifamily housing is permitted as of right by the town. We have to pass a bylaw that means no special permits, no nothing. You can do site plan review, but it needs to be a non-cumbersome process. You have to have at least one zoning district. The guidelines did elaborate and clarify that you can have sub-districts, you can have multiple districts, but there is a minimum size. Each district has to be a certain size. You do have to have a net gross density of 15 units per acre, so you can have more dense in one part of a district and less dense in another, but basically the net density has to be 15 units per acre. And if you are an MBTA commuter rail community, which Foxborough is, you have to have at least, for us, it's 40% of your multifamily district has to be within a half a mile of a commuter rail station. You cannot have age restrictions on this housing. So there's a lot of 40Bs we've seen, or others, we've done senior housing, or sometimes we'll say it can only be 2 bedrooms. That type of restriction is not allowed in the zoning because it needs to be suitable for families with children. So that means if people want to build 3 bedrooms, they're allowed to build 3 bedrooms. As of about a month to 6 weeks ago, Foxborough is considered a commuter rail community. That means that we need to, well, because we have 7,682 housing units as of the 2020 census, that applies a 15% multiplier to that, which means we need 1,152 multifamily units to be zoned on at least 50 acres. One key provision is that, to remember, is that the mandate means you have to zone for the multifamily, you do not have to build it. So, we do not have to ensure that it's built, although there's mapping that's done, and you'll see on the map there's certain areas you cannot count because that you couldn't build on it, like a roadway or say like a stadium, because that's town land. Like certain things like that you cannot build on. But developable land is considered developable. Just because there's a development there already doesn't mean you couldn't be redeveloped. So that's not part of this constrained land. So what's our timeline? By December 31st of next year, we have to submit to the state this approved zoning district. So that gives us 1 year. There will be future planning board, because this is a zoning change, there will be the required planning board public hearings on the zoning articles. Like I said, this is just the beginning, the first meeting to start getting a temperature gauge from you all and from getting the citizens to understand a little bit more why we're talking about this and what the timelines are, and then we anticipate a lot more conversation moving forward. And we do plan on bringing something at the May 2024 town meeting. So one question that's been asked of me is, so what if we just don't do it? I mean, Foxborough, we acknowledge Foxborough's done a lot of work lately, especially on housing. We have the 200 units up on Walnut Street. The zoning board has approved local initiative project and other 40Bs. We are with the Walnut Street and Moore Street projects, we'd be at over 14% subsidized housing inventory, and if you recall, the 10% is what's required. So I did ask Pat Costello, and then let me back up. We know that the grants, we might not get as many grants. So they've actually, the first time they came out, they had about 4 grants you wouldn't be eligible for if you didn't comply. Now they've bumped it up to about 15, and I think they're looking to expand. But what the bigger teeth is that when I asked Pat, and we did get a letter from the Office of the Attorney General, in March this year, the Office of the Attorney General sent out a memorandum to all cities and towns affected by this, saying that communities that fail to comply with the law will be subject to civil enforcement. And MBTA communities cannot avoid their obligations under the law merely by foregoing state funding, because that's where we're all like, well, we just won't get the grants, we'll move on. The law requires that MBTA communities shall have a compliant zoning district. So, and it does not provide for any mechanism by which to avoid this. So, and there's also a risk of some federal action and civil rights action under the fair housing laws. So, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward. All the communities are kind of in the same place. I can say Barney did a tally for us, and out of the 175 cities and towns subject to it, we believe 9 have passed bylaws. So obviously there's a lot more votes to come. We anticipate this May town meeting that most of us communities will all be in the same boat. We had hoped a lot of them would go ahead of us. We kind of held off while we waited to see what was happening with our commuter rail, whether it was going to become permanent or not. We thought that gave us a little extra time, and it did, but the other communities also got extra time. So about 6 weeks ago, when the state informed us we are now a commuter rail community, they sent us this lovely map that shows the radius. There's a little greenish blue dot in the middle. That's the train station. And the sort of yellowish cream colored area is the area, the developable land, according to the state, that's within a half mile of the train station. So under our compliance model formula, we have to have 40% of the 50 acres within a half mile of the train station. Another 60% could be located elsewhere. So we've been bandying about some possible locations, and this is one we've brought forward. You'll see there that there's a table. I can't see it on my screen because of the thing I have here. Let me minimize it, actually. So we're required 1152 units. This would yield 1,256. We're required 50 acres. This is 59.1. I should note that it needs to run by property line, so that's why you can't just cut and make it 50 acres. You have to find the right fit. The unit capacity is higher at 21.4 acres, so we might want to look at that, and it's 40% as we discussed. The 40% is the minimum required in that area. I will say we have, and one of the reasons we wanted to come tonight is we have looked at the possibility of doing more than one district and perhaps putting a portion of the district in the other part of town, but a very informal discussion sort of around town. Again, nothing binding and nothing really that telling. Seemed to be that people were worried about putting districts in more than one place. They kind of thought up on Route 1 was sort of a safe place, and but again, that is completely open for discussion. Those of us at the table didn't want to make that decision. We feel it's important that you know, the community and these two boards perhaps guide us on whether you want to try to, you know, we had talked about sticking a district over by, say, the Lodge, because the Lodge is already developed. It's already a high-density development. You know, I think the fear was that could be redeveloped into even higher density and bring it closer to neighborhoods. With that, I'm going to pass things over to Barney to sort of talk a little bit more about the zoning and dimensional.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
You know, we talked at the beginning about, like, do we just ignore this? And obviously we can't. So the next question that comes to my mind is all this worth having a commuter station? And would we ever want to say, you know what, we don't want the commuter station anymore because we don't want to be held to these requirements?
Well, I don't know if that's I don't know if we get to say that,
Okay.
but at a minimum, we would go back to, we would still always have to have 768, zoning for 768 units, because we're an adjacent community regardless with Mansfield Train.
Okay, thank
so we're
you.
never getting away from it.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we've been an MBTA community for decades, so
Okay.
that train station, it doesn't have anything to do with it. We've been getting an assessment and whatnot for decades, so it's,
Okay, that's
we were
helpful.
always going to have to do 768, but we have been bumped up to 1152.
Okay, thank
But
you.
that's a good question, and another planning board member did ask the same.
So basically,
Yeah, I thought that, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I thought that was a good question too. Thank you for asking it.
so it's really, I mean, it's 400 more
Yes,
than we would have had to do anyway.
correct.
Okay.
And
Thank
and in both cases, it's just zoning for that number.
Right, it's not we have to do them.
Correct.
Did we confirm it has to be the Foxborough station too? We've said we have land within a half mile of the Mansfield station.
Don't.
We don't?
We checked it.
Is Spring Street's too far?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of that's too far.
Okay.
Yeah, we did
I figured it
verify.
was close, but.
No, unfortunately not.
Thank you.
Any other questions before Barney gets into the nuts and bolts of zoning?
No, once he does, I'm going to ask him a question about the dwelling units per acre, but that's all right. Go ahead.
Well, I have a question. I probably could have saved this to the very end, but, so we do this, we zone everything. That doesn't, so we zone it, we've complied. So if nobody comes forward to build, I mean, you can't force someone to build. So as long as we comply with what we're supposed to do and zone it, we'll be done then. Obviously, somebody may build on it, but we've done everything we're supposed to do at that point.
Correct. The requirement is to zone,
Yeah.
not to build.
But,
Yes.
but realistically, you have to remember that the town meeting is the one who decides. We're going to put this forward, and the body will make a decision about whether they want us to proceed with that. But this is the prudent thing to do, to approach it this way.
I think we can all be thankful we're not on AdCom for the May meeting.
One more stage setting question too, sorry. I know that the regs were kind of changing and a little bit fluid for a little bit. Has there now been a pause on dates and pieces of, so we feel like the state is at a final place now that we're not gonna be adjusting? I mean, who knows what they'll do,
Agreed.
but we feel like they're at a final state now, okay.
Yeah, they've issued final guidelines,
Okay.
so yes.
I do have one more question I'd like to
Sure.
ask Paige to bring forward. Could you please let whomever know what the dollar value of grants we could possibly lose?
Well, it is hard to say. You know, the smaller ones was a couple 100,000 that, you know, I know the police department got some, and that was it. But it would be MassWorks, and I was sort of a little cavalier about it because I'm like, we just got the $4 million MassWorks grant for Walnut Street. That would be tough to have lost. They can't claw it back according to them right now. But we probably wouldn't get. I was like being a little cavalier and being like, we're not going to get another one of those for at least a decade. But now when all the other ones, it's hard to say. It's like municipal vulnerability preparedness. They're really expanding it.
We're talking millions of dollars, not 10,000.
Well, we're not talking millions annually. It's really probably a couple 100,000 regularly, but certainly those one-off big grants we might not no longer be eligible for. I mean, I think I've gotten something like over $9 million in grants since I've been here in 8 years, and I don't think we'd be eligible for any of them right now. So it has the potential.
And you said they could be going after more grants. You know, maybe some of the road grants that we get
Yeah.
could be hit down the road
Yeah,
too,
we don't-
that we just don't know yet, because you said it could be up to 15 different grants.
Yeah, they're expanding every
A
year.
substantial amount of money
Yes.
to be left on
Well,
the
and you've
table.
also got to think that if it does go to litigation or the courts, even if we win, which we probably wouldn't, the cost for outside counsel would be quite high.
Paige, would it ever, I know, because you
we gotta think
just
of that.
mentioned like a grant that the police department got. Would that ever include, when we get that match for the schools?
I did ask Pat Costello that. It's not currently on the table, but he couldn't guarantee that
That it would.
down the road, you know, because I said, would they ever hit Chapter 70? Would they ever hit Chapter 90? And he said it's not on the table now, but we just don't know where this is heading and what kind of stick they're going to have to use to get this
To get
going.
175 communities to.
Yeah, well, and plus, 'cause we know like the Taylor almost got it last year. And usually that's a prerequisite to it happening. And the borough was 17 million. I don't know what the scope of.
I haven't heard
Taylor.
that they've gone after, like, that type of grant isn't yet on the table, but we don't know. But I also want to, in full transparency, say that, you know, it's been expressed to us in the past, too, that with a development, regardless of where it is, you know, the fire department or the public safety might need to have some sort of substation. I mean, if you build 1,000 new units out on Route 1, what does that do for the service to 95 to Route 1? And
Schools, buses, I mean, you could go
so
on and on.
there will be costs, you know, that's why when it was a couple 100,000, it was like I think most towns were like, oh, we can forego a couple 100,000. You know, the cost of what might have to come with this is much more than that. But I can't speak for public safety, but I do know that's been raised previously as a concern. It's just, you know, what services will the town have to offer when you have that kind, and we have, I know, the police chief here, but, you know, that might be something, that's a day-to-day cost that the town would have to bear between building and then staffing. You know,
we don't-
that's not a minor amount.
But we'd also get more tax dollars.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's not like we'd have to self-fund it. It would somewhat fund itself.
Correct.
In our densest zone right now, just for us and the people at home to understand, like, the lodge and those, how many acres, how many units per acre are those?
I did a back of the napkin calculation, and it was 9 and 11 units.
Okay,
per
so we're
acre.
talking even bigger than
Even
than
more
that,
dense
just so
than-
people
Oh, yeah.
understand.
So this type of zoning does not exist anywhere here or elsewhere?
Does not exist in Foxborough now.
Do other places comply immediately because they already had high density near train stations, or is everyone?
Interestingly enough, I looked that up today, because I saw on Barney's list that Wareham had it, and my aunt is from Wareham. And so I was mentioning it to her, and she had a blank stare, and so when I Googled it, it looked like their commercial district already allowed residential development at such a high density, they didn't even have to change their zoning. Now, I don't know that it's been built, and she wasn't even aware of this, and it turns out it's.
Whether it's built or not is irrelevant, right?
Right.
It's whether it's zoned appropriately and
Correct.
they already are all set.
They're all set.
Just submit to the state, say, we're good.
Wareham?
Okay. But
So-
we're not close. Are we anywhere near there, or is this completely new?
The standard in the R15 is 10 units, and it's greater than an acre. You can do 8 units right now by right in the R15 and like 64,000 square feet. So it never comes really close to this.
So this is 100% incremental. We're not like 20% there or 10% there. This is all incremental new for this, whatever area is picked. Okay.
Unless we overlaid it, I
Right.
guess you could look at it as incremental in that if we overlaid it over like.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about, if it's possible to.
Well, like we did look at, like I said, the lodge property, and,
Yeah.
they do have density. I can't remember now whether they were 9 or 11 density. Probably they were the 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would guess.
So we would need to build.
Well, we don't need to build
or not build,
anything.
I'm sorry, that was,
Right.
we would need to zone near the lodge at like 20 to
We'd
get to
actually
an
zone
average of 15.
where the lodge is, like that parcel alone, which
Oh.
is interesting because why isn't it spot zoning? But okay, different rules. But we'd have to rezone that property to allow the 15 units per acre.
Okay.
Which would mean they'd have to tear it down,
And the
or-
thoughts that they might not do anything because it's already there and it would be very expensive
Yeah.
to remove. But it's a gamble.
Paige,
Ish.
Yeah.
in that event, would you lose those large units under 40B, under 40B?
Yes, because.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, under the 40B statute, it's 25% and all of the units count. Under this proposal, which Barney will get into, we're proposing to do a 10% affordability. Which
So really,
ironically-
anything like that would be kind of
Detrimental.
cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah. And because it is ironic, they passed this law, like we said, it all just came out of nowhere very quickly without a lot of people talking about it. And the law doesn't even contain a requirement for affordability. So all of this is to improve housing and affordability of housing, and yet all these units are not required to be affordable. So it's a challenge. Barney?
Okay, so actually, before I get into a very, very brief overview of what I've drafted, I want to go back to the question, Lee, that you asked, where you said, are we pretty much done with any requirements? One of the concerns that I would have is if very few towns do not comply with the statute, that either the legislature or I guess what used to be called the Department of Housing and Community Development would tighten the screw somewhat. So even though Pat has talked about, in addition to the inability to obtain certain grants and being susceptible to litigation, there's nothing that would prevent the legislature from coming back with something that's more stringent than what's here right now. So that's something that hopefully will not come to pass, and nobody has said, but it's something that in the back of my mind I would be concerned about.
Yeah, for me, if anything, the timeline, the December 24 seems like, I don't know, I don't think they'd push it out, but if anything, maybe giving towns a little bit more time. I don't think that they will, but that's going to come fast for all these towns that need to comply.
There's going to be half of these towns are not going to pass this.
Yeah.
Well, again, and we can do all we can to bring it forward, but there's no guarantee it's going to pass an open town meeting in all of the, in many of these communities. So that's where, the towns can do their best
I mean,
effort.
there would have to almost predictably have to be some legislative movement
Right.
on this going forward, and probably not more stringent either. It'd probably have to be the other way, you would think.
Don't know.
And we-
Don't know.
You don't, but.
And we still don't know that even if we take this in front of town meeting and the town does not vote it in, is that, I know Pat Costello's thing said that will be looked on more favorably, but that's a guess at this point, right?
Well, I will say in the webinars I attended, and because I remember thinking, well, we'll try it, and if it doesn't pass, and the head of this division was saying, yeah, we anticipate this could take 2 or 3 times at town meeting.
Yeah, so how can people be by December of 24? It seems like, to me, it's a guess, but it seems like the state's going to have to push that date out as town meetings play out, over the Commonwealth.
Well, I've even raised the issue of, you can't bring a repetitive petition back after 2 years, without a favorable planning
I'm
board.
sure the state will make arrangements.
Exactly. But I do think, they'll have to look at communities that at least try. If you went in May and tried, and then you try again, and I guess, I don't know if they expect you to go back in the fall. We don't always have a robust fall town meeting, so there would be a hardship, for the town, but I imagine they're going to expect that.
Barney, when you said it could become more stringent, just say.
I'm just
no,
speculating, hopefully.
Exactly. But
Hopefully I agree with Jeff, but yeah, I'm just
in a
speculating.
perfect world, we go to town meeting in May, it passes. So if we start to comply, can they change the rules somewhere, or once we accept what they've given us? Like, they're not gonna come back and say, oh, by the way, when you say more stringent, did you mean just stringent on what they might take away from us as far as grants? Will they ever change those numbers that they put on us?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
Because we would be acting in good faith, in connection with the law as it stands now and in connection with the guidelines as they stand now, so I would hope not.
But I think what you're saying is, we would hate, let's say, that this goes and town meeting passes it, and then other towns don't comply, and then they loosen things up, and then we've already passed something more strict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, or they turn
Yeah.
around and say, okay, well, you guys aren't doing what we asked you to do, but now we're gonna make you, have, whatever number would change.
Well, that would have to go back to
units or
town meeting.
something-
It'd have to
something
go
like
back
that.
to town meeting.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, if we do everything we can do in good faith, they're not gonna come back and say, okay, well, now we want you to have,
Yeah, 20 per acre as opposed to 50.
Yeah.
I
I'm
can't-
trying to think of what to even
It's
suggest.
all guesses,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
hypothetical.
But again, I can't imagine, but that's,
Yeah.
keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So you've all gotten a copy.
Can I jump in here? I think it's a legitimate concern that this would not get past a town meeting. Because, going back to accessory apartments or dwellings, that got shot down pretty thoroughly. And this is like accessory dwellings on steroids. So, I do think, getting it by a town meeting, even maybe a couple of 3 town meetings, is going to be a major challenge.
I would agree with you, Dennis.
Yeah, it's gonna take a lot of education.
Education's would be the key.
Yeah,
I
you have
agree.
to.
In the good news department, we got another grant. So I have to do the RFP for this, but we're going to be bringing on a planning firm that has a PR sort of specialty to try to educate and take some of the burden off us. We've done the housing thing. Frankly, it's a tough battle to fight. So we're looking to get some professional help, and the state is paying for that. So we will be having hopefully a consultant on board by January to help us as we lead up till May to sort of
Will they
educate.
be from a side, I'd call it, like, housing production plan? That consultant was definitely, slanted to get things to pass, so I think people.
Well, the goal of this, obviously, the state funding this, the
Right,
goal
right,
of
so
it is
just
to get
education.
housing passed. Is, that's, so, as, you're different because you're not a town employee, but as town employees, we can't necessarily recommend that the town not meet the law. So we're always gonna put our best foot forward to bring forward a proposal, and, we were able to get funding to help promote and to help educate. It's always up to the voters. So we realize that, but we're going to do the best we can to bring the issue to light and, work with the resources we have and go from there. But yeah, I do think it will be a pro-housing approach because we're trying to figure out if we can get this law passed, this rule passed.
And though this is a zoning proposal, which typically requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting, it's only a majority vote. So,
Well, that was part of the law?
yes.
Now all multifamily housing is now majority.
Majority.
So I know you've gotten a copy. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least go through it. I'm going to give you a very, very high-level overview. My objective was to draft in as simple and straightforward a manner as possible a bylaw that, number one, complies with the pertinent requirements of the statute, and number two, does so to the extent possible within the framework of our current zoning bylaw. So Section 981 of the proposal sets forth the purposes of it. 982 establishes what we're calling the Foxborough Multifamily Overlay District. As I've drafted it, I've just drafted it looking at Route 1, not including any other district. So in that regard, it overlays portions of the S1 district, portions of the R40 residential and agricultural district, and the economic development area overlay district. Section 983 states that provisions of the zoning bylaw that pertain to the underlying districts remain in effect, but only to the extent they don't conflict with the proposed new bylaw. 984 sets forth the permissible uses in the proposed overlay district. In particular, multifamily dwellings of 15 dwelling units per acre are allowed by right. 985 sets forth the dimensional requirements for multifamily dwellings, and you can see they are over here on the screen. By comparison, multifamily dwellings in the R15 district require 6,125 square feet for each unit that's in excess of 3, 100-foot front yards, 25-foot side yards, and 75-foot rear yards. So you can see there's a little bit more density here, a little bit more compression here. Section 986 permits the planning board to vary the dimensional requirements by means of a special permit, although there is a limitation as to the height of dwellings, and permits more than one dwelling per lot. 987 establishes the parking requirements. It's a maximum of 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. For multifamily dwellings as they currently exist in the bylaw, it's 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And it also authorizes shared parking facilities. Now, we also authorize shared parking facilities in the overlay district with respect to commercial uses. This would also allow it with multifamily dwellings. 987 provides that the multifamily dwellings are subject to the zoning bylaws' current performance standards. 989 imposes affordability requirements and standards. 10% of the dwelling units in developments of 10 or more units must be affordable. The reason only 10% is not by choice. That's what we're limited to. If we had a 40R district in Foxborough, we could have up to 20%, but we can't go beyond 10%. And I think that's one of the weaknesses of the statute. 9810 says that all multifamily developments are subject to planning board site plan review in accordance with the zoning bylaws site plan review requirements. 9811 is a severability provision. And then beyond that, we have related zoning bylaw revisions, and those are provisions of the zoning bylaw that would need to be revised to comply with the proposal, assuming the proposal is to go in effect. Everything that I've drafted is subject to revision. Whatever is appropriate can be revised, with one exception. We can't obviously not comply with the statutory requirement as far as the 15 dwelling units per acre requirement.
And I believe the parking is
by
1
right.
point, and parking is
1.5.
limited to 1.5, so that's why that number is 1.5 and not 2. It's, that's a statute as
Yeah.
well.
So can I ask a couple questions about
Yeah.
this? So, well, the first one does relate to the 1.5 versus 2. I don't understand that at all, because you're creating a higher density, not a lesser density. So
But you're near the train station.
parking, even in the R15 zone where there's 2 spots that are required per unit, often is tight. Some people have more than 2 cars, whatever. I mean, it works, but it's cutting it by a third, or whatever it is I think problematic. Number 7 seems a bit repetitive to me, but we can argue about that another time. The other one was about the 10%, and so under current affordable housing guidelines, the 25% gets you to count 100% of the units towards the goal. Is that the case here with the 10%, or no? It's just 10%. You're just adding whatever those. You had 100 units, 10 of them would count towards affordability. It's
So
not like out of the 1,152, 120 units would count towards that.
So if anybody's not familiar, on a 40B, in an apartment complex, all the units, both market rate and affordability, count as affordable units for the subsidized housing inventory.
Yeah.
In a condominium development or in a single home development, only the affordable units would go onto the subsidized housing inventory. I don't know what the answer is because there's nothing in the guidelines that indicate that.
Okay.
I would think the answer should be that all of the units would be counted, but there's nothing in the guidelines that I've seen that
wouldn't
that
count on
addresses
it
that
yet.
issue.
But I also agree with your contention earlier, which is that, you know, under normal circumstances, why aren't they trying to get 25% of those units as affordable? Not for any counting towards the total count, but for the purposes of dealing with the fact that there's a housing unaffordability problem in the Commonwealth, and they should be looking at that and, you know, and requiring the developer to do that.
The statute
I
did
think
not.
the whole idea that the volume itself will drive prices down.
Trickle down
Some
housing?
point. Yeah.
Supply and demand.
Would think the logic would be that way.
The statute itself does not address affordability.
Right.
The compliance guidelines do, and again, there are those restrictions. And the restriction that we are under is the maximum we could do would be 10%.
So that's what they're saying. They're saying that's all we can have. We couldn't
Yes.
say, because like you said, that's all we hear on the news every night in Massachusetts and across the country. So affordable housing. So if we were willing to up that number to help that too, and plus I was thinking when you add that, because this isn't my forte like you guys, so when you add that 1125 or whatever the number is, right?
1152, yeah.
Okay, so, and we're only doing 10% that would be affordable, so is that gonna skew our 14 point something percent?
Still raise it.
Where we are, so it's good, so, because we're gonna be adding more homes, but only doing 10% that's
Yeah, it will
affordable,
it
so
will
then that
dilute it a
number,
bit,
are
but
we
it
gonna
should
be
move the
for,
dial.
is this
Fortunately,
gonna?
will come up much slower.
Yeah,
If-
I'm wondering, is this gonna force us to do another 40B, or, you know, or?
If
other-
you had
you know.
taken something like Paige was talking about saying we're gonna put that footprint where the lodge is, then you would lose, how many units are there? 350 units of
Yeah,
affordable housing?
248?
You lose the
250 and
whole
248,
enchilada.
yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
Right, and you know, 40B, that whole thing is kind of a joke of a dance anyway. I mean, it would have been so much better if you just set a target at like 3.5% of your housing and then counted the affordable units as affordable and not say, oh, we'll roll everything into it. I mean, it's,
Well, but just
That's the
by
legislature.
calling it affordable too, when you slap the 40B on, that's when you don't have any say.
We lose control.
You lose control of,
When you're under 10%, yeah.
yeah, okay.
well, that's kind of
But
like
if you,
this,
yeah.
by
But if-
right.
but if
That's what
you-
by
yeah,
right
but if
means.
If you're calling it affordable, at least the town could set some standard. I know we have to follow their guidelines.
Yeah, we'd have to follow their rules for affordability.
But the
Okay.
biggest thing is, and then this has always been true, and it continues to be true, that what Barney was saying earlier, is what used to be called DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, they've always had their eye on more units. It had nothing to do with the pricing of the units in the existing community. So Foxborough, if you were doing it strictly based on price, may have had hundreds of units that were already in existence, so it would have counted towards just the affordability component. But their job is to create more housing, and they're very open about it, and this is part of that.
And Foxborough's further hampered by the fact that we're in the Boston metropolitan area.
we are.
So all our wages and rates are based on Boston numbers. So something that's, affordable out here or priced out here is considered, doesn't match what Boston has. So we just don't meet. It makes the rents, the affordable rents out here a lot more expensive, shall I say.
Right, you could be earning $60,000 or $80,000 a year of a family of X, and you would still count towards the affordable guideline.
And also the 1.5 parking, like, I get that if you were truly like in the city, but if people are going to be taking the train, maybe to go to work, maybe they work in the city, so they're going into Boston, but when they come out here, they're
They need
gonna
cars,
need
yeah.
their cars to go to the grocery store, so it's not like in the city, my niece moved from Mansfield, into the city. She works at Brigham and Women's. She got rid of her car because everything she can do is in walking distance. So that's not the same. We're utilizing the MBTA maybe for the commute to work, but it doesn't work on the other side when especially if it's up on Route 1. How you get to a grocery store, how do you get to anything, the cleaners, the post office, so the train isn't going to get you to those things. So the 1.5 is kind of a ridiculous number.
It is, but I also think having sat through, Gabby and I have sat through a lot of these webinars, I think the vision is eventually, especially with this density, if you had 1,152 units in one place, then you might create these walkable, livable communities where you might have services right there. There might be shuttle buses that run to uptown, that type of, so I agree, because if you have to pick up your kid from karate or, somewhere else, you're gonna need a car in Foxborough, but I think they're hoping to create these livable, walkable communities that don't rely so much on vehicles.
Very similar to what we did with the master plan for the redevelopment of the uptown. We're trying to make it a walkable community, and it should be on a much larger scale.
That's the difference between ideal and reality. You're talking about reality.
Yeah.
This is an ideal.
Barney, can I just ask about, getting back to this whole concept of really kind of linking your zoning, but really the whole concept to the availability of commuter rail, even though we'd qualify anyway, even if we didn't have a station. So that would be either Sharon or Mansfield commuter rail, presumably, but now, or Walpole, but now it's sort of for us. And we don't really have a fully functional commuter rail right here. It's very limited, and I would almost think, if we do go forward here, that, I understand that your base is 15 units, but I'm just thinking there's nothing that says somebody couldn't come in more than that. The town would have some controls, but I'm thinking that given our rather unique situation with commuter rail, that there might want to be, or we might want to consider some sort of conditional setup where we're linking density to the functionality of our commuter rail and what the capabilities are of it. Because right now, those capabilities are pretty limited. And it's almost like, I don't know how many people are aware of that, but, and I understand we're talking about different sites around town, and potentially only 40% of the total in that particular district, but even so. Again, there's a presupposition there that everyone who would be living in these units would be utilizing that for transportation. Well, that's great if they all work in Boston, because I don't think you can get to Providence from there, right? Right. So, I mean, how many units would that be? That would be about 500 units if it was 40% of the total, a little less. How many of those people would all be working in Boston right now at a time where people are working remotely more than ever? It almost makes you wonder if this is like some scheme to prop up the MBTA.
Yeah, it came about before COVID,
Exactly.
and now everyone works at home, and the whole world has changed, quite.
That's why I
rapidly.
say, does Foxborough really want to be a test case and push on this? There's got to be a lot of towns that don't, and we're responsible for bringing something to town meeting. And I would just say, let the chips fall where they lay. By the way, what is that?
If I can jump in, I really like the point because, we are being subjected to the full depth and breadth of these regulations, yet the service that is being offered here is quite minimal. And that doesn't seem right in terms of how this is rolling out.
So is the MBTA gonna bulk up the service that's going in?
There's only so much you can do
There's
there
only
right
so
now.
much capacity on the
Right.
lines.
It's probably like a chicken and an egg too, like until there's the demand, they're not gonna invest until.
I mean, we had a better schedule until this year, you know, we had a little bit of a better schedule, but there is, you know, I don't think the use probably justified. So I know the Franklin folks were upset, you know, Walpole, there was some diversion of service for them. They are the traditional high users. Foxborough was less so. So, although we have Dan here, Dan is kind of he also knows a lot about the MBTA. They were monitoring it. So, yeah, I don't know prospect-wise. I know that the Franklin line, you know, and the lines into South Station are limited. So this is a problem that there's just only so much you can do to get into Boston.
Can I just ask also, I didn't see it in any of that documentation that you had sent out. What is the parcel 2?
Yeah, so I could show you. What do you mean?
Oh, I know
parcel
where
two?
it is.
The alternate, the District 2?
District 2 across Route 1?
Well, yeah, except that,
Yeah, but what is it?
that's P10,
P10.
I think. Is that P10?
so-
One of
so
the big
here-
parking lots.
Which brings me to a point.
You got that right.
Because right now, the stadium, I know Dan knows this, has a requirement to be able to supply X amount of parking for events, games, et cetera. And now they're gonna lose that parking theoretically.
If they build.
If they were to build, or anyone was to build on that land, whether it's the stadium or not. But, you know, if they purchase the land from the craft group, or however it happens up there, you know, so that's a it's another factor that has to come into play at some point for them to be in compliance for, you know, the sporting events and other events, concerts, et cetera. So just, it's in the back of the mind, but it's there.
Well, I would certainly imagine that would be part of their business model and their decision-making as to whether it was worthwhile to dedicate all that land to housing, because then they'd have to compensate with parking.
How
So,
many spaces in P10?
don't know.
Dan?
Couple
How many?
thousand.
3,500.
Oh, my God.
More than you'd need for the parking for this.
So basically, though, if the zone is put on stadium land, we've met the requirement, and Kraft can use parking lots.
I was just thinking the same thing.
We cause another problem.
But what if,
we've
at some
complied,
point,
though.
the state mandates us to build?
Well,
I don't think they can
I
ever
don't think they
mandate
can,
us to
yeah.
build. I mean, that,
We didn't think they could do this.
well, they haven't done it yet.
Can we, I know you guys know too, this is not a question for you, but we're probably not as familiar, and definitely people at home, but the site plan review, can you educate everyone a little bit on what that does give us control over?
Very little.
Right, but I know, yeah, so, I mean.
It doesn't prohibit a use. It allows you to look at the layout,
The
sort of
lighting.
circulation, you know, parking, lighting,
Drainage.
drainage.
Right.
So it's-
Landscaping.
Yeah, landscaping, but you cannot prohibit the use. So it's really just making
very
sure
li-
that
it's-
what
it
they're
looks
gonna build
decent.
is the best possible. But it's a by right, it's considered a by right approval. It's not something the planning board can say no to.
Right.
So thoughts on districts? You know, I know this is early, you're just absorbing it. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, Barney, the 9.8.4, the multifamily dwellings of 15 dwelling units. Paige had mentioned that it could be an average across the parcel or the land. So I wonder if it's worthwhile making it explicit in 9.8.4, just so that it's not, you know, the law doesn't say that every single acre within the 50 would need to be 15 density.
We should put
Well,
word
done.
about the word average in there somehow, yeah.
Another quick question, is it accessory structures?
You guys getting a crash course in planning.
I know. So when I see the word accessories, I think of when we have accessory apartments, and I hate to see that word because people might see that and say, so that doesn't have to do with, this is our cluster. Is that like a garage or a shed or some other?
Yeah.
It could be a bigger building than that, because if you had acres of lawn that you had to maintain
Okay.
or macadam you had to maintain or whatever, they could put equipment in there. But it's an
Okay.
accessory use to the
Use of some-
primary, which is
okay.
living.
Because when I saw it, I was thinking, I'm like, with everything so like clustered and stuff, like, how would you, like, and, the lack of knowledge I have of planning, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh no, when people see that word accessory, that might be a scary word to think that now we're going to, just because it didn't pass.
Handful of people, I think.
Barney,
Yeah.
I assume you meant by
Yeah,
that,
but
we're talking about parking.
this is a crash course, at least for me.
Well, maybe, should we get more, we might want to get more specific.
Speaking of that, could you walk us through that whole, there were two sections that talked about the park accessory structure issue were they contiguous parcels or contiguous ownership and what was the distinction? I didn't quite get it.
You mean the shared parking or no, not shared?
I think so, yeah. In other words, you would have a facility that would
So let's just say.
could
for
even
argument's
be
sake,
owned by some third party, really, right?
You have two buildings it could be on separate lots or on the same lot.
Right.
Instead of two parking areas.
Have a shared one.
A single
Right.
one that the two of them share.
Yeah.
Which we also have, we did it, the last time we did any changes on Route 1, the major changes we did on Route 1, we allowed for shared parking facilities, as well. So again, you've got one apartment building here, another one over here, where they're on the same lot or different lots. Instead of two separate parking lots, you have one that the two of them share.
But do they have fewer parking spaces than required?
Well, again-
It depends on the use.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you have complementary uses, if you have something that runs during the day, and then the planning board finds that the other operation is at night, it's like, well, we don't need double the parking, you can share it and it makes sense. But for, obviously, apartments, that would be a tougher sell, because you're gonna end up with the same peak
Probably have
demand.
to, probably have to provide the 1.5 in total, whether it's in a structure or one parking lot area.
And would this allow parking garages? Like,
Yes.
yeah, okay,
Would.
And again, with a height limitation, though.
okay. Same height limitation?
Yeah. No, I think we have a
No,
different.
it's lower, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Is there any scenario that you could think of that you might have different ownership within that district?
On this particular district?
Or, I mean, the other one wouldn't, if you had multiple ones, they wouldn't be much bigger than that,
I can't imagine that this district would end up with different owners, but that's just, I don't think the craft group sells land very often.
No, but I'm thinking actually,
But homeowners could, I mean, right?
Well, they're
I mean,
not in
it's
the
like
district.
None of those houses on the other side, it's hard to tell and
Yeah,
see.
no, that's
Okay.
one
So
single lot.
it's just P10, okay.
Well, I don't know that it's P10, I might be mislabeling, I don't know if that's
But
P10,
it's-
but it's,
but it's
it's one
parking.
of the craft group lots, it's not
Okay.
owned by
There's
anybody
no-
else.
okay.
So even though the ring's bigger,
Yes.
it's, okay, right there.
but theoretically, there's nothing either in the statute or in this that would preclude that. I mean, you could have
Yeah.
different developers, different ownership.
Correct.
So a question, so let's say that
Hey, Chris could do a land lease and let
Mm-hmm.
someone.
green area covers our requirement, we zone it, it's all Mr. Kraft's land. I guess the elephant in the room, and I don't mean to call you an elephant, Dan, is, what do the Crafts think of that? I mean, is it too early, is it too,
It's never too
is,
early.
I guess I don't want to make a decision without,
I know. Well, if you're gonna speak, I'm just saying you have to come to a microphone.
I mean, have we talked to the Crafts about that? Have we?
Not really.
Okay, I guess that's exactly what I was gonna say, Mr. Chairman. We really haven't talked about it, and I'm open and willing to talk about it and look forward to it.
Which is what this is all about
Yes.
tonight anyway. Okay, and I apologize, I didn't
no,
know
it's
if
fine.
that was a discussion with you guys yet or not. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Okay. Okay. All right, part of the discussion, next level.
I mean, Kraft couldn't say you can't do this, right?
No.
I mean, we want to be, a good town, but, I mean, if this is what's best for the town, if it's the lesser of the evils.
Well, no, you could zone that as the allowable use. He would not be required to make the.
No, but what I'm saying
He
is.
could ignore it.
Correct.
So, so basically, okay, maybe I'm missing something here. If we zone it here, it's Kraft's land, it's a parking lot, they're not gonna wanna give it up. To me, this, like, what am I missing? Why isn't that a no-brainer?
I mean, they could give it up. That's the thing, is they could give up the parking and figure something else out, I guess.
They could.
Yeah.
But we've still checked the box. We've done what we're supposed to do.
Let me just take us back in history a little bit, because
Yeah.
there have been previous discussions with members of the Kraft Group about the potential for other types of development in the area, not necessarily that specific only piece of land. And they're aware of their obligations for parking, and there's been talk about parking structures that would take the place of flatland parking that they do today. So I'm certain that the development arm, Mr. Krantz's group or others at the Kraft Group know about this. They would take that into consideration when they make a decision about, yeah, that's a pretty good idea, or can we alter the zone slightly, or whatever those things might be that would allow them or make them want to, or not
But couldn't
deal
they,
with this.
I mean, that doesn't mean they're building housing units.
That doesn't mean they won't either.
It's,
Listen, there's a million ways to skin a cat. All right, let's be honest here. Mr. Kraft could lease that land to a development group. He could have his own people develop it as well. There's a lot of different ways that the housing could go there if the Kraft Group wants it there. So
And
that's a determination that only they can
But
make.
it doesn't restrict their use. So
No.
even though it's zoned that way, they
They
can
could
keep a
leave it like
parking
that
lot.
forever.
If he comes back and he
If they
and he
felt
The
wants to,
underlying zoning still takes effect.
If they felt that that was the highest and best use,
yeah.
then they
No,
could
but,
leave it alone.
yeah,
But who knows what the government powers that be would use in order to convince them to do otherwise. None of us know the answers to that.
Yeah.
except
That's my
maybe-
biggest concern.
Yeah.
yeah.
That is
But,
my
but
biggest
now that you zone it that way, that doesn't mean that they have to put housing. They can leave their parking lot. Does that restrict them from any other, because are we changing the zoning of that spot, or we're just adding?
We're just adding a layer on top.
Just add, that's why when it says overlay,
Really
okay,
is a good question.
Yeah.
So they could do it still.
yeah, so,
It would
yeah,
still be S1.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, there we go.
All right,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
that's-
so it doesn't restrict them to
That was my-
something, another project.
Right, that was my
yeah.
concern when I brought it up
Remains
earlier.
S1, just allows for the multifamily.
Overlay
It's an
district.
overlay.
So it adds to, it doesn't.
Broadens the
Doesn't take away from it.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I will say, because I am always a straight shooter, and knowing Dan, and, I do know that there are other areas they own that the Kraft Group would prefer to have this zoned on. I mean, having not spoken to them recently, but, there are other areas. But this choice was made based on the likelihood of the voters, those areas. Well, two-prong. One would be on the stadium side of things, which we might have a concern about just putting more pedestrian traffic across the street and having to cross and whatnot. And then the other area is in the R40 zone adjacent to North Street. So we just didn't feel that the North Street neighborhood would likely embrace, their high-density development in that area. So I'm speaking for them a little bit just I haven't spoken to them recently about it, but I just want to put that on the table, that my hunch is there are other areas the Kraft Group would much prefer than this.
If I can just throw in a point, and I don't know their business model, but I know they're involved with Patriot Place quite significantly. They may look at this as positive in terms of foot traffic and proximity, and they may think this is a good idea.
They may.
The state could come back and say this district does not comply with the requirements, potentially.
Well,
Because
under the
it's
current
not-
compliance model, it does meet, the current model that they've put out, it meets the tests
How do we
today.
know that?
because with the consultant we have, there's a whole spreadsheet with
Okay.
lots of tabs. It might even be in that, I think it's on that Dropbox. So if you want to, you like spreadsheets, I know. If you go to that Dropbox, you'll find there's a whole thing, and you plug and play
Okay.
all the different information. So it has passed the test of the
We're
current
confident that
standards.
it will meet the requirement.
And do the other areas that you feel they would prefer pass the test?
We haven't run those.
Okay.
I don't believe that the residential portion is of sufficient size, but I'm just going off memory.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is on our page. Like, one thing I just wanted to point out was, in the bird's eye view that we had of this earlier, that dotted line circle, I believe it did encompass that area as well.
The Ashcroft area?
Oh, for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
oh, definitely, it's in there, yeah.
It was right next to it, yeah.
But ironically, there's no pedestrian access to the train station.
Well, this is across the
Get made.
street, so
Yeah,
like,
right.
from the stadium, so I don't, like,
There's no pedestrian access either today.
No, no.
Well,
that's-
you know, there's always bringing back the old overpass.
We're actually working on that for the World Cup.
Shuttle buses.
No, we're working on that for the
Yeah,
World Cup.
yeah.
Jody, yeah, if you want to, if it's going to be quick. Oh, this isn't the forum for that?
No.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Just where the parcels are that you're talking about, that's all.
they haven't looked at them yet.
You're only talking about one place?
Right now.
Right now, yes.
That's all.
For tonight's meeting, yes.
Right.
So, marching orders, talk to the craft group, find out what they want.
Yeah, number one, sure.
But, I mean,
You've pretty much nailed a lot of it already during your presentation, I think.
do you think there's an appetite to move this district to another portion of, let me go back to this map. Is there anywhere in here that you all think is better suited?
What about, what about,
Better.
No.
what about the lot, I hate to say this, but the movie,
The terminals?
The old
yeah,
terminals.
what about the terminals?
I mean, that's within it.
But is it enough?
I don't believe it's a sufficient size.
Does it
and
have
you
to be
also-
one contiguous parcil, or could we do?
No,
It
no.
doesn't.
It can be multiple
But it has to be a
parcels.
minimum, I can't remember what the minimum size was, I don't know if you remember, but you can't have like little 5 acre.
Right.
That could be like one on one side of Route 1 and a chunk on the other side.
Right.
Yeah, but this one I think is, if we have to do something, of course, we want the craft organization to weigh in. I mean, this is the least,
Obtrusive and.
yeah.
Because
That's not gonna give us everything though either. That's only a portion of.
No, that's all of it.
That's all,
That
yeah.
hits the whole
The whole
town?
Yeah,
district.
you said it's 12,000
Oh, my bad.
or
That's it.
1,200.
Okay.
We
Here's the
talked
thing.
about splitting it up, but we ultimately came forward with this one with just one parcel.
And I mean, we could what if it like, what is the legislation gonna do? Could they force craft to build? I mean, like, we could what if it till the cows come home. I think we've gotta put forward what is the least intrusive in order
To what?
to me, to the town, to the residents of
To
this
the
town.
residents, okay.
Yeah, nothing against the craft organization, but
Right, because if we did it on North Street, everybody on North Street is going to come to town meeting and vote no.
and we just lived through the warehouse with them. So
Right.
I would not recommend going down that path again. Like, I don't see where else it could potentially be. Now, I have a question. With the revolution discussion, you don't have to answer this. I'm just looking at you to look at you. With the revolution potentially moving, does that free up any land back
Yes.
there? It's probably not big enough. But I'm just wondering if they're heading out of town. I mean, that does abut residential.
Yeah, that's a
It
heavy
Doesn't look like it's in
residential,
that circle, though.
There's not enough acreage there.
Dan would like to speak to
This
this.
is Walpole's backyard too, pretty much? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracy, if you recall, when we did the training center though, they committed to leaving the training center in Foxborough.
So they would still use it even if they moved.
Okay.
Okay,
Bring
thank
out
you,
here
Dan.
and then
If who
just games.
The
with them.
revolution about the
Revolutionary.
training center will still
yeah.
stay. Okay, thank you. Personally, I think you gotta have the craft discussion. And I mean, even though we'd collect more taxes, I do think we need, from a public safety standpoint, some understanding of how this gets handled without compromising the safety of the rest of the.
I mean, historically, that, the reason that the S1 district was zoned the way it was and excluded any type of multi-housing, family housing, was for some of the reasons we're talking about tonight. They didn't want to have to finance, a separate police or fire station up there. They didn't want to have school buses crossing Route 1 to pick up young children and bring them into the schools, which are so far away from that area, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean it meets today's sniff test, but that's just part of the history here. And
The
now
master plan
we're
did
facing
say
the fact
no
that those
residential.
things probably will have to happen if we do this.
Well, I mean, there's no place else to put it.
Can we just clarify about bleachery? And,
Sure.
And what is that? Is it outside the radius?
It is.
Oh, for this thing, it
Is
is,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be close, it's not close enough to the Mansfield terminal
No.
either, correct?
No.
Okay.
But
we could
not
do the
whole
split.
district has to be
We could do
within the half mile.
60% of the units, we could do
Oh, that's
600.
right, you can do it
We
outside
could do
the.
600
Yes.
units over there and then 400 something up
Well,
here.
the only reason I say that is, I mean, not that, as you can probably tell, I like this whole thing at all anyway, but
No.
I can really feel
but
it.
at least that would enable you to kind of work on, killing two birds with one stone and addressing site conditions there at the same time.
I mean, you're not wrong that, and Matt that's the validity of
Right.
Matt Brennan's point, he had put out a memo, is that, that site is never gonna get cleaned up without investment. So someone has to make a lot of money in order to take the time to clean up the bleachery site. So, and this would be a money-making proposition. So that's a valid point.
But I was a little concerned with his contention that as long as you did the parking structure,
Yeah, there was
I mean,
air.
for years, the brownfield regulations in the state of Massachusetts were very clear that no residential habitation was allowed anywhere in a brownfield. So I'm not saying he's wrong, but that's new
No.
information.
Yeah, he
I mean,
would
if you-
know.
And I don't think he was proposing that, that was just something
Yeah.
that somebody else did.
And
Yeah,
It
if we,
was, wherever it was.
Weymouth.
It was Weymouth, yeah.
Yeah.
if we split the district to like, just imagine for schools, for buses, it's like 2 mega developments instead of kind of everyone, maybe.
Well, it's two smaller
No.
developments
Yeah, they're
versus
still,
one
well,
mega.
they're still big.
They're still
They're
big.
still big. I'd still
They're
call
still
them
big,
mega.
but from a school standpoint, I mean, would you bust this whole section to
Because it
Taylor?
would all, theoretically, it would all be in one district.
Right.
you'd literally have
Schools
to
would probably have to.
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna be able to take those type of children in any
No.
school. They would have to, they would be redistricting the
Within-
parcel
Within the parcel,
This
right.
bus is going to the borough, this
Right.
one's going to the Taylor.
But they do that, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
my kids were on Main Street, bust them to Taylor,
Right.
and we could see the IGO.
Yeah.
They could walk to the
It
IGO.
just seems like adjusting, and I can't speak for the schools or police and fire, but what's worse, adjusting to two bigger ones on opposite ends of town, quite literally, or having one bigger one to kind of deal with. I don't know what the answer to that
Which
is.
elementary
But
school would it be?
I think if they added this many, it
couldn't
doesn't even
be.
matter. But
Yeah.
They'd have to
it,
redistrict.
believe today it's Taylor.
Yeah, it's Taylor.
No.
Well, I just
And you
think
have that
that,
more
It's a new
neighbors.
school
I mean,
on Route 1.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what. Yeah, it's a new school number one, exactly.
I think it puts us in compliance, right? And the thing is, I think when Tracy, when you just said, well, I don't think they can ever make the crafts or any owner of land, you can't force anybody to build, okay? I think the worst thing that could circle back around is they say, well, you have this and you have an owner that's never gonna build there and possibly make us try to pick another spot. I don't even know if that would come true, but you can't.
No, we
force-
zoned for it. We did what we
Well,
needed
that's
to do.
what I
yeah.
mean, but I mean, if people, if they say, oh, you found a way out of this,
Hey,
but,
I mean, the state could do anything they
Yeah.
want to do, but, I
Yeah.
mean, I think we've got to make a decision and recommendation to town that is the best now.
Yeah, we've got to solve for the problem we have
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Rather
We've
than
got
guess.
some definite homework to do. But I'm not convinced at all that if we zone it there and it never gets developed, that the state is not gonna come back at some point in time and say, you pulled a fast one, guys. You know,
What, they think we're in the background shaking hands with the crafts?
Yeah, it's not a fast one. It's
No,
it's-
we picked a perfect spot.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
zone
there's
it. It's
plenty of
never gonna do-
communities, just to give you some context, there's plenty of communities and some of our neighbors that are not worried about doing this because they know they have no sewer, no water. So they're like, we'll zone it because we know no one's ever going to be able to build it. So I don't think we're gonna fall as far on that, you know, we passed the straight face test a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah, and it's right near the station, it's, you know.
Yeah.
Could
Do we
get
know
any
what
closer
Mansfield's
to the
doing or
station.
any
They've
other?
already approved theirs.
They already have
They,
approved.
they did a whole development as far as the downtown.
Who did- who approved it?
Mansfield.
You know, if one of the objectives is to comply with the statute by getting something passed at town meeting, adding districts is gonna make it more difficult
Yeah.
to get something
Multiple
through.
districts,
Yeah.
yeah. For
And
sure.
again, look at what happened on Moore Street with just 54 units, let alone,
Yeah.
you know, the bleachery.
Right.
Tell me about it.
Well,
Yeah,
except
Bernie
that
members.
those same people are very concerned about the contamination issue as well.
True. So
Well,
I think step 2 is, let's get a meeting with,
Is Mansfield now, are they
Yeah.
largely in compliance
Yes.
because of downtown?
Yeah, well, they did some rezoning, I believe it was, 40 units per acre, they approved last June.
And that's when
40
we saw
units
those big
per
ones
acre.
go up? But that was
No,
before
that
that.
One
was,
of them was
they had already
already
had
up.
those,
They
but
were
they
already built
rezoned, like, there's more land
Yes.
further down,
Okay.
and they've rezoned that, and it's up to 40 units per acre, some areas. So they went all in.
If you wanna see what Mansfield did, I got it here. It's very
I'm just curious
complex.
about what they would have to build.
Well, and I think complex
what their
is
obligation
gonna kill
would be
this
now
on the
based on
vine.
what they've already built, because it probably would not be all that much, that onerous.
Do you know what they have for account now, Barney? In Mansfield?
No, I don't.
No.
Yeah.
I can find that out.
Yeah.
And obviously, public outreach, so that's obviously a big component of that, and getting citizens' input. We're gonna wait until we have this consultant to help us steer and drive that piece.
Probably, because I mean, it's the holiday
Yeah.
season, and I'm hoping to get it, you know, get the procurement done as quickly as possible, and get something going in January.
So that'd be heating up, yeah, January to May-ish.
Yes.
but is the issue public input or is the issue public information?
Well, it's both.
Getting them to know
it's tough to get
what's
input
going
if
on.
they don't know, if they don't have an accurate picture of
We
what's
pretty much
happening.
know the input.
The armchair quarterback.
Pretty much know what everybody
Right,
thinks about
right.
it,
Right.
so it's really just a
It's
matter of
information.
informing them of the circuit, like, you know, I'm sure you all kind of come in going, you know, and we get it, but it's sort of like, well, what's the lesser of all the evils, shall we say, which sounds awful, but, because we do have a housing problem, but that said, it is a bit frustrating to be.
Which will
told.
create a whole bunch of other problems. Like,
Yes.
that'll create, you know.
Yeah, exactly, so, and
Did
there's
we
no
give you what
guarantee
you
it'll be that
needed?
affordable, so,
Did we give you guys what you needed?
I think, yes.
I am glad not to be you.
Yeah, well,
Nice.
Sorry,
One way
just
to
gotta
I mean, we're
say
not
it.
in that much better positions either.
Yeah,
so-
that might go two ways, you know,
Yeah.
see?
Paige, do you have something else you want to say?
oh, well, I wasn't quite ready for it, and like, she'll kill me.
Nope.
Gabby?
No.
Well, we just want to acknowledge 20 years of service by Gabby Jordan. She's been with the planning board for 20 years.
Yay.
And serving the town beautifully, so.
Well done, Gabby.
Gabby, thank
So
you for everything,
valuable.
Gabby.
The planning board gave you a little gift. I don't have a chance to envelope it yet.
Yeah. Close
Busy
your eyes
doing
while
the
she puts it
covert.
in the envelope.
Thank you for
Diana
everything,
even
Gabby.
gave me a pretty envelope.
Oh, wow.
Doily.
That's the official full name.
Gabby, yeah, we get serious. So yes, Gabby is our historian, and we're always saying, Gabby, what happened then? What happened there? What school were you in when you first started? What you were working at?
At the Lewis Building. So I was at the Lewis Building. I was by
Oh,
myself
that's right,
for
I
a lot of
forgot they
times.
were there.
Yeah.
Well, the basketball kids were there.
Yes.
I went to school there.
And then she was in the basement of the old town hall with the
I
flooding,
remember
the
that.
canoe.
I was in the selectman's office first, in between the two secretaries. And my boss, the planner then, was in the assessor's office, so we were completely separate offices, and then they moved us to the basement.
Well,
Much better accommodations nowadays.
So I've had 4 offices since I've been here, so.
So we love Gabby. We appreciate her. She's
Thank
the
you
one
for
that keeps us
everything you do.
going.
Thank you.
And
You're welcome.
so, sorry, it was Tracy's fault. I was not going to do it on public television, but
she
Like,
deserves
she'll
it on
kill
public
me.
television.
yeah. So anyway,
She does a lot for our town, so she should be recognized
Thank you.
on TV.
All right.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Motion to
Take a
adjourn.
motion to
Second.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We do need to roll call. Leah, yes?
Mark, yes?
Stephanie, yes.
Seth, yes.
Tracy, yes.
No, that's
Dennis,
No,
yes.
we have to,
Are you on,
Dennis
are you
just
on the
said
select
yes.
board?
But Dennis said yes. Okay.
Did you guys ever get Gary, or do you need to roll call?
No, Gary's not here.
oh, we don't have to roll call. We're adjourned.
So, I'll entertain a motion to.
Second.
We already did that over here.
All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
aye, aye.
Gary's gonna be.
All right, good night, everyone. Much more to
Thanks,
come.
everybody.